Welcome to Tech Field Day. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am the event lead for all things mobility, networking, and security here at Tech Field Day. And we are excited to be bringing you this very special edition of our roundtable about Aruba Atmosphere. You may remember that Aruba Atmosphere 2023 happened at the end of April, and there were some exciting new product announcements that came out. And we are here with some of our delegates from the Networking Field Day experience that happened there to discuss those announcements, kind of talk about the impact they might have in the networking wireless security space. Also, kind of talk about what this means for the future of HPE Aruba networking. I'd like to take a few moments for our guests, our delegates, to introduce themselves before we jump into the discussion, starting with Keith.
Hello, name is Keith Parsons. I run a conference called Wireless LAN Professionals Conference and do Wi-Fi. You can find me on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons.
Yeah, I'm Avril Sauter. Welcome. And I'm an independent consultant, and I've been in the wireless industry for years and years, touching all of the different wireless technologies.
Sean Neal, my day job is director for customer engagement strategy for VAR, and been participating in Tech Field Day for quite a while. But you can find me on Twitter, SV_Neal, and my blog is the same location, like blog.svneal.com.
Ed Whedon, network engineer, cat herder at night, and you can find me on Twitter and Mastodon at Avalon Hawk and most other social media.
We're going to start off by talking a little bit about some of the big announcements that came out of Aruba Atmosphere. I think one of the biggest, of course, is that now the company is known as HPE Aruba Networking. But one of the reasons why it's known as that is because they're more tightly integrating with a lot of the services that are being offered by HPE. And one of those is GreenLake. Now, you're probably not familiar with GreenLake. Here at Tech Field Day, we've heard a lot about it. We've recorded a lot of content about it. It involves a consumption of cloud services, either in the cloud or on premises, kind of as an pay-as-you-go type thing. Now, why would that be important to people in the wireless space? Well, it turns out that Aruba Central has gotten a facelift. There's a lot of excitement about some of the things it is capable of doing, some of the information it's capable of sharing with you, and it also runs on GreenLake. So I want to open the floor up first to talk about this big redesign of Aruba Central, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that rely on Central all the time. And, they sometimes come in and gnash their teeth because they don't want to deal with it. But boy, man, did they go all out in making it look really pretty.
I think it's more than just pretty. I mean, it is obviously that it had some designers working on the UI, but they've changed the interface so that it's a different way of looking at things. We're used to seeing a left side and a top side with tabs, and when there's more things to see, you just have to keep tabbing down. And they changed to a more, they call it a planet solar system kind of look, where there's the sun and then planets around, and you can drill down that way. So they've changed that technique, and from what I've played with it, it seems I think it feels more intuitive for me, thinking down that kind of a tree pie look rather than just tabs.
Yeah, and to kind of continue on with that, I am looking at it from that traditional view. I struggled with it by the first couple of time discussions that we had around it, trying to shift my brain into that mode, because being used to that kind of left side top bar, kind of navigating around. But as I stared at it more, as they went through more and more demos, it became much more pleasant, I would say, to look at it and go, okay, I'm looking at this device. I can then drill out from that device or drill down into the device, or into different parts of the network. So I think that's being able to have that shift in view is something that's going to help teams. I think of it from an operations lens, where a lot of operations shops are probably used to working in a particular mode, right? And this is vastly different from the way a lot of ops teams work, at least in my experience. So I'd be very interested to see kind of how this evolves over time, and as different groups, adjust to it and kind of, and see what kind of feedback Aruba gets on it. HPE Aruba, sorry.
No, I think one of the interesting things I think that we see here, right, is the old central became very click intensive to like go configure something or whatever. And I think as it's grown, right, and as Aruba is continuing to add more features and functionality, being able to get to that stuff quickly and view it quickly, consume the data quickly is going to become more and more important. I do think that that little planetary model that they have for viewing has made some nice impact in seeing the data and like consuming it quickly. It takes a little getting used to, but I think that's okay. I think it's a sort of a welcome redesign to address, it's no longer just an AP platform or switching platform, right? Now as they added in more and more things, you're going to need more and more ways to slice and dice the data. And so I think it's a welcome change, and I'm glad to see that they're willing to try something that's different, instead of more of the same.
So I want to jump in here and I want to talk about that part where you said that, Central used to be full of clicks. And that's one of the things that we've seen from a lot of these management platforms. I have the power to do just about anything I want. I can deploy new hardware, I can collect statistics on other things, and it literally is drinking from a fire hose most of the time. But some of the technology that Aruba's been talking about is based on reducing those clicks. It's using things like AI and machine learning to evaluate what's going on, to surface information out of the noise to help you understand, there's a problem with this access point, there is a security issue over here, and it's bringing it all together in one space that allows you to have that kind of visibility instead of having to swivel your chair back and forth to multiple different plastic screens to collect that information, or glass, or whatever they happen to be made out of. So, does the power of including AI-based information gathering and honestly suggested remediations, does that make it easier for you to have a central view of what you need to do?
I think it's going to be a wait and see. People who've used Central for a long time are used to doing things their way, and that feels comfortable. A lot of people haven't moved, 100% into Central so far. They're still using their controllers, and so they're like two steps behind. It feels like there's a lot of pressure from HPE Aruba Networking to move things to Central, and that's going to be where a lot of the energy and in the new UI is based. Some of the things you mentioned, Tom, about having some AI helps along the way to get you a little closer, are there. But I think it's going to take some time for people to learn this new way of consuming the information.
I think an interesting part there too is when we look at what's available on these dashboards and how we consume that information. It's important to not lose sight, I think, on some of the other pieces like APIs and things like that tie into these things. I think Aruba, if you look at sort of the history of Aruba's always been a sort of best of breed, plays well with others type organization. Then strategic partnerships like Palo and some of those things. I think, there's some challenges potentially too as you move more towards this cloud-based model that's very sort of Aruba viewpoint centric. How do you continue to maintain some of that visibility and interesting, insights around security and things like that when it's not all Aruba infrastructure currently, right? Obviously, we'll probably talk more on where Aruba's headed with some of this stuff, but I do think there's still some gaps in there, and that'll be interesting to see how those get addressed.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Keith. I think it's going to be very interesting to see over time the adoption, what the adoption looks like, and as teams get used to consuming, everything through Central, and as an Aruba customer, within my particular shop, and thinking of from our lens, we're getting a big push from Aruba to kind of shift us into central. We have compliance issues that we have to contend with that, and that's also going to be interesting to see as well for some of the larger customers, particularly system integrators and other customers that have certain security compliance requirements. For example, we right now I look at central and a lot of the stuff with AI ops. There's some really, really powerful stuff there. And there's some really, really neat benefits that I think can come from that. The challenge is within my industry, within the customer focus that we have, we can't use it because it's cloud and it's AI, and we have a lot of very stringent security requirements that we have to contend with. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that kind of adopts and molds over time. Both from a cloud and an on-prem, perspective.
So let me jump in there and bring up a good point, because Ed, you're absolutely right that the direction that a lot of these companies are starting to take their management platforms is very much, we're going to host it in the cloud, so you don't have to worry about running the 25 servers that it has to run off of, and we can constantly push updates to it to keep it fresh, and we might occasionally be able to get some metadata that we can use to improve everybody else's experience. And we're going to use AI and a bunch of other cool tooling to make sure that that works. But of course, you're going to run into problems when you bump into a regulatory agency, whether it's somebody medical, whether it's somebody government, whether it's something like that. But we've also seen kind of the rise of an industry of these kind of cottage clouds, if you want to call them. Oracle specializes in healthcare and government, and IBM has its own little niche that it plays in. Could Aruba benefit from working with HPE GreenLake to kind of customize these environments where, let's just say, GreenLake Health Cloud meets the requirements for HIPAA and other things, and ensuring these kinds of things? Or, maybe there's an option in GreenLake Gov Cloud to turn off the AI recommendations so that information's not being passed around. Is there a market to run central on GreenLake in these environments to meet these regulatory challenges that other people might not have, or I'm sorry, that other people might have, but say, well, because I know I can't run it, I'm not even going to look at it?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I believe there is a market for it. I'm just speaking from my particular lens, which is government and federal. There's the FedRAMP component, which is a completely another ball of wax to contend with. But I think I think if they're not looking at it, they have to look at it long term, from a long term strategic perspective, because there is a market gap there. Maybe not necessarily a gap, but there definitely is a target for them to hit with that.
Well, I think Aruba specifically, because they got a big boost, I don't know, maybe a decade or so ago, because they were one of the first to be FIPS compliant, and a lot of government agencies picked them up because they had already addressed those issues. So if they're feeling like now they're a little behind the ball, they definitely need to move the way that Tom's talking so they can stay ahead of the game.
That's interesting. I did not know that they were first on the FIPS side. That's very interesting.
We spend a fair amount of time daily working with regulated companies and things, and it's definitely something that they struggle with, right? Is are our policies, there isn't always a silver bullet to, like, a checkbox, make sure I'm HIPAA secure, click this button and I'm good, right? But there are definitely, we'll definitely see tools out there that provide guidelines and feedback and on configurations. Are those HIPAA compliant? Are they SOX or something? So I think there is some opportunity to give some feedback. I'm always careful that you're not going to magically become HIPAA compliant by clicking a thing in the cloud or having a tool that does that, right? There's physical components to it and some other things as well. But I definitely think there's an opportunity to help people be better there, and then part of that, some of the stuff we're seeing from the AI insights and things, if there's things that could come up there that were like, hey, we think you're a healthcare organization. Maybe I opt into a healthcare oriented recommendations feed for, that type of stuff, the insights I gained from, the AI ML that's running on the platform that helps me towards that goal. I think that'd be welcomed by most customers.
Yeah, just to kind of backtrack on that, Sean, because you said something that clicked for me. If I think there would be a very interesting market play for doing just that, for the AI data lake, insights that is specific to federal or medical or PCI. Just thinking of a couple different security models there. And if you can do something to address the security controls and contain that data and still be able to meet the security compliance and anonymize the data as much as possible, but still be able to draw useful insights out of it, that could be a really potentially powerful play.
So I want to talk a little bit about security, because one of the things that came up was the acquisition that recently closed of Axis Security, which is now Aruba Edge Connect SSE. We got a great session on that in our networking field day exclusive selection. In fact, it was probably one of those sessions where we wish the guy would have had a little bit more time, because he didn't even get to touch on a lot of those topics. But how do you see SSE being integrated into the edge and benefiting people all over? Because I know that, when SD-WAN and SASE started coming out, people were like, oh, well, it doesn't matter to me because I work from a coffee shop. I don't have a piece of hardware that sits on in front of my connection. But now with SSE, this can be run as a client on a device. This can ensure that, secure resources are able to access other secure resources without the need for a VPN. They go through secure web gateway, they use CASB, what have you. Where's the value for someone like you in running these SSE services?
I just want to kick in first. One of my first questions when they presented was, are you the Axis that does the security cameras? Because it's tied together and it's the same name, and there was a little confusion there. So before we go on, just that's not the company, the security company they bought.
Yeah, so Axis Security they've been around a bit. They were, a Israeli startup, I believe. I picked this area for my topic, sort of writing out of this. So, there were a couple of things I think that are interesting. As someone, like, I've done a lot of network access control in my life, a lot of ClearPass, and competitors of ClearPass. And one of the things that we saw as COVID hit, right, was this shift from people being in the office to people being at home. And then that kind of went, from home to kind of work from anywhere, right? And that punches a lot of holes in a NAC environment, right? So I think, SASE, we have to be clear on like some of the terminology, but because a lot of people like opt into being, I'm a SASE product, and I don't really think that they would qualify, but being able to securely connect people or devices wherever they're at, and being able to integrate that into an overall policy is a huge win for organizations, right? I think it's something like it's almost a must-have, I think, and for a lot of, for anyone that has knowledge workers that aren't in the four walls of an office, you got to protect that data, and being able to prevent somebody from connecting to your applications or things, and it's all important. I think this move is a really good one and a natural one for Aruba to move into. And I think we saw it, a couple of years ago with the partnership with Netscope and Zscaler, that there was some interest there. Have some control over a product that's adjacent to everything they're already doing.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think it's where these things of time is really going to be very telling, and how they're able to integrate these components in with the existing product ecosystem, because And it's also going to be interesting to see how it competes against some of the bigger heavy hitters in the marketplace, especially Zscaler. We are a very big Zscaler consumer, so it's going to be very interesting to see how does that mesh up. Are they going to start building it so that the products are going to be favoring the access side, or are they still going to be able to have that play and that interoperability with other SASE and CASB products?
Yeah, and I don't think that that can be understated enough, that there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to create that environment to use their own type of offering. There are companies that are trying to integrate that offering with other ones. My favorite question to ask people who are selling SASE services is, well, can I swap out your software and put my own choice of software in there? Usually what I get is like shaking heads, like, no, you can't do that. But I think for SSE, you're kind of getting away from that hardware limitation, and you're playing that pure software game. And I think that there's a huge amount of um, value in allowing the customers to kind of pick this or pick that, or just to consume it all as a service. And I think that a lot of companies just want that. They want to be able to sign over the check, and but they also want the freedom to move around when that check gets reassuringly expensive, because that's another thing that we've seen as companies who have kind of defined this SSE space have said, in the old days, you used us because your provider didn't have these services and they just rented them from us. Now you can go to us directly, but boy, are we going to make you pay for them. All right. Any other thoughts on secure services edge or any of the other security aspects before we move on to the next part?
I'll just comment on one other thing I saw briefly in the accessing, and I think this, to your point, where we could have used more time. They hit some of the three big security pieces that people are looking for, but there was a fourth one in their portfolio around the experience stuff, and I would love to see more of that, see more of that highlighted, see where that integrates with other sort of experience plays that are out there, right? I mean, Aruba has some of their own, so I'd love to see how that ends up getting integrated into everything, because it's a pretty interesting component of it.
Well, let's jump into the next major topic that was probably one of the favorites of our delegates during the event, and that would be private 5G and private LTE, because this is another, at least at the time of this recording, pending acquisition for HPE Aruba Networking, and that would be the folks over at Athonet. And we've heard a lot about private LTE. May have heard it referred to as CBRS in the past, and there's a lot of companies that are exploring this as an alternative for challenging RF environments. Things like warehouses or stadiums or places where they need different kinds of connectivity. And the idea that HPE Aruba Networking not only has seen this as something that's important, but they've gone out and taken that additional step of acquiring a company to kind of jump in there. And so I wanted to kind of pick your brain about this, because of course, I mean, we've recorded an episode of the On-Premise IT podcast about the private 5G and private LTE aspect of things, but we've also talked to a lot of people inside of the company about the value of what they bring. And I just want to toss it out there. Where do you see this technology going? Because it wasn't that long ago that we were recording information talking about how, it's going to dethrone Wi-Fi and it's going to cause it to fall away, and everything's going to be a cell phone carrier now. And we're sitting there going, well, no, that's not accurate. And so I think we kind of crossed that bridge, but now we're kind of trying to figure out where it most makes sense to deploy.
So I'd love to comment on that. I think there's a couple things, and one of the things everyone hears LTE. It's important to understand what the private LTE is not, right? It is not, in most cases, an intent to replace or be your like roll your own sort of telephony company, a cellular company in your offices, right? Really, a lot of it comes down to having carrier-like controls over the over a wireless infrastructure, not our traditional Wi-Fi, but another band. It's additive in terms of capabilities, and being able to take that to places that have things in motion, forklifts, cranes, like that type of stuff where human safety is on the line, and things need to be very responsive and free of interference and those types of things. Those are the places traditionally where this 3.5 gigahertz CBRS private LTE stuff tends to shine, is in sort of that nuanced space, trying to provide high quality connections to things in motion, things that are very sensitive to latency problems or jitter, some of those types of things.
One of the things I think that HP has done in the past, and we talked about during this atmosphere, was the idea of a neutral host. And at atmospheres years ago, they had a neutral host available. We could use our phones and get on. And what they've seen in the neutral host part, and I think we still need to get back to the discussion over private 5G and Wi-Fi and how they're different in the different markets. But I just want to address this neutral host piece. HPE Aruba is planning on being that in between middleware between the cellular carriers and whoever's buying the private LTE, so they can offer that neutral host. That's a piece that's been really, really difficult for a lot of people who think, oh, I might go this private LTE route, but then what about the person's phone? And we don't have coverage inside our building, and dealing with each individual carrier is a political and business management nightmare. And so Aruba's already done this in advance, and their plan is to be that in-between person so that an Aruba customer contracts with them and they deal with all of the upstream issues that have to do with the offloading of cellular calls. So I think that's its own little bugaboo. That's not really how I've seen most private LTEs. The situations need it, but it's always one of those things in the background. Well, if we put this all in our building, can we also adjust that? So just want to lay it out there. I was impressed when they talked about that they have a solution that they've done in the past, and it looks like it's going to be there for their version of private LTE moving forward.
I want to perhaps take this in a slightly different direction because it quite horrifies me, the fact that HP think that they can, or Aruba think that they can actually become a host operator, because it's very different from their background. But what I see, HP and particularly with the new spin of going more into the networking side, is that they've got their wireless, their software defined WAN, they've got their SaaS solution now, they're putting all these pieces together with these cloud networking solutions, and they've brought in now this 5G cloud, similar, like they've got a cloud Wi-Fi system as well. And they seem just to be coming into this software cloud management kind of environment. And I know they've still got a lot of the hardware pieces, but to me, what I saw at Atmosphere 23 was very much bringing that whole network piece together. And in fact, we go back to our beginning conversation when we talked about Central, when we talked about those little circles and things like that. And what I saw was the ability to move away from a hardware orientation where it's very hierarchical into saying we have these structures now of software functions that are going to exist somewhere in the cloud, right? And I see this 5G as just being another piece of what they're adding. I see lots of pieces coming together in the Aruba networking, all being managed together. Does that make sense? And to me, it actually horrifies me. I know they were talking about being neutral hosts, but I think they're orchestrating the pieces, but I think it's quite dangerous for them to go into actually thinking they can be an operator. Don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think, at its heart, Aruba's always been sort of that last mile connectivity company, right? And they've done it in a way that's always been secure, right? Whether that's originally the Wi-Fi, and then see them move into, then switching, right? That's a lot point of connection, right? So, and then, things like the VIA and the VPN clients and things that came up over the years. And then, so I think it's, wanting to play in that space, I think is very natural for Aruba. I think, connecting the end users, providing a good, secure experience, an easy experience is something that they want to do. I love the fact that they're trying to take that on because, I mean, to Keith's point, we've seen a lot of people come and go and fail at being a neutral provider, or it's very expensive. They sort of have a monopoly on that space, and it's very difficult to work with, where they even choose if they want you to be a customer or not, right? Based off their costs of like supporting your request of wanting neutral host cellular in your environment. So I think it's great that they're trying to take it on. I think there's a lot of nuances with it that are challenging. Like we all take our cellular connectivity for granted in most places, right? Like we get surprised when we don't have connectivity sometimes. So anyway, I think I'm glad they're taking it on. I do think there's definitely some challenges there. But I'm glad to see they're working through it, because I do think, I mean, having neutral host cellular at a environment, a lot of my customers would jump all over something like that if they could.
I didn't want to really focus on the neutral host part. That was just an adjunct that they're adding because people ask. I think the real value is private LTE, private 5G allows us to deliver a wireless data network where Wi-Fi isn't really good right now. Places where we have long distance or we need to have guaranteed delivery, Wi-Fi fails at some things, and the LTE 5G side does a pretty good job. I mean, just an example, in Wi-Fi, if we get to a neg 65, neg 70 dBm, we're like, oh yeah, we got pretty good signal. In cellular, that's like neg 105. That's a 30 dB differential that they can still pick out and use, and we can't, which is why they can have a lot further distance than we do. The LTE portion of it, the way the cellular technology works, and Avril obviously, I mean, she wrote a course on this, is more deterministic. So if we really need to have that guaranteed delivery, there's a better solution there. Or if we have robots in a warehouse that move faster than Wi-Fi roaming normally allows, we have a different solution. So I think there's a value in talking about private LTE, private 5G as a solution for places where we can't offer Wi-Fi. And I like the fact that HPE Aruba Networking is saying, yeah, you're already doing this. It's on your switch fabric. It's on your network. It's your IT guys doing this. Our cloud's helping you babysit it. And we can add this extra functionality, and your same team can do it. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago when CBRS first kicked out, I wrote a couple of blogs and articles, and I got certified to do CBRS, but it's very niche. I mean, it's separate. It's outside of the rest of our Wi-Fi. I like where this is heading. They're not there obviously right now, but the way they're talking, I see that there's a place where we're failing as Wi-Fi, that we could still maintain some control and solve those wireless problems.
So I see Aruba, because Aruba doesn't have the wireless 5G piece, right? And the beauty of 5G is that you can deploy any 5G radio network, and the core network is independent of it. I mean, that's the beauty of it. And so HP, by providing the core network and not the radio piece, is allowing the industry to be free to deploy, the customer to be free to deploy whatever radio solution they want in terms of the CBRS 5G side, but they're bringing together the way that the customer can provide the services, and the core network pieces come together and manage that and integrate that into the enterprise, which is perhaps the radio is always challenging, so I certainly don't want to dismiss, because it is very challenging. But the core networking integration piece is really the strength that HP is bringing, and their background should enable them to be very successful at that. And that's what they're bringing to the enterprise. And I think that was what was so exciting about their acquisition and their announcement.
And I think with their history that Sean had mentioned, they've been security conscious from the very beginning of Aruba. And I think the challenge here is taking the SIM security, where SIMs are the devices secured, and integrating that into Aruba's role-based security, and how do we show which user is using that SIM, and then apply those role-based policies back to the private LTE devices. So they talked about it, and we all see that there's some issues there, and I think we're in a wait and see mode to see how that's going to turn out. But they know that there is a difference between SIM-based security and the security we've been using so far in Wi-Fi.
So let me add one more little wrinkle to this, because we've talked a little bit about some of these solutions, whether they're central, whether they involve private LTE and Wi-Fi, whether they involve security and stuff like that. What's the end goal here? I think I have an idea in mind when we talk about what GreenLake is going to ultimately encompass, but I want to get your thoughts. I mean, we've known for years that HPE Aruba Networking is kind of, they are a very large name in the edge connectivity space. I mean, they dominate in the Wi-Fi space. They've been coming along in the SD-WAN and SASE space, thanks to not only SD Branch, but their acquisition of Silver Peak. They built out a great line of data center switches, and the CX line of campus switches has been doing well as also. Where does this go? Where does this lead?
I want to jump in because this is the point I was trying to make earlier, Tom, is I just see that HP are just going for these pockets of software, cloud-based software solutions. And even though they did talk about the switching, they did talk about the hardware and pieces like that, to me, for the first time, I was seeing less emphasis on that and more emphasis on these services, the network functions and the components. And I think what we're going to see going forward with HP Aruba is more acquisitions or development to complete that higher level services perspective. At least that's my opinion of what I saw there. And I saw their redesign of Central actually leading into that direction. What I'd like to see is more integration between the pieces going forward, because I'm seeing them as blobs rather than integration between them. And I'd also like to see more. I felt that there wasn't enough AI in there, and I think they're setting the basis to do that, but I haven't yet seen their direction on that.
This is a very different atmosphere than atmospheres we've seen in the past, and I think part of that, I think, speaking to Errol, both you and Tom mentioned, which is as we've seen this growth in Aruba, like, one, they're going to be challenged, right? Especially as they're rebranding with the HPE Aruba Networking. These solutions that they're really focusing on, and the way a lot of Atmosphere was presented was around the solutions. I think they're all areas that are adjacent to space that they're in today, right? So whether that's the data center, that's a different type of wireless edge, a different component of remote connectivity, right, with the SSEs type solutions. So they're making, I think, the bets that make sense. They're extending their capability. Aruba's the security side of it, the application visibility type stuff, and expanding that into the data center, I think, is important. Having these context sensitive sort of data fabrics that are a little bit easier to consume, I think are interesting, right? So I do think they're headed in the right way, and I do think talking more about this in solutions makes a lot of sense for Aruba and what they need to do to continue to grow, because they are going now, especially as they merge it closer and closer with HPE and Aruba. They have to take Cisco head on, right? In order to keep everyone happy, right? So I think solutions are going to be a big part of it, and I think they're making steps in the right direction. But I guess the integration has to be there, right? That's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, it kind of also feels like the other takeaway that I took is continuing to see a push towards just going back to Central. They're pushing everything into Central, and Central is becoming the unifying point of managing and maintaining everything. And Central's had a lot of growing pains over the years. I, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they, really integrate all these different components in. One of the things I was, they hinted at, like with the CX10Ks, those are being managed by Fabric Connect today, but they want to bring that into Central. And it makes sense logically, as next step, iteration down, strategically moving forward to bring that into Central. But in my opinion, my estimation, they have to do it right. They got to get it right out of the gate. They can't do an integration. They'd be, have minimum viable product, and then, okay, well, we're going to add more features down the road. No, they really got it. They really do have to execute on that, particularly on the data center side. But I think this is true for anything related to Central right now. I think, if they can build that orchestration in from branch edge connectivity all the way through the data center and all points in between, I think it's a very compelling, powerful product. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they stitch all of that together.
I think you're right. And what you've just defined was what I see as their number one problem, is that they're pushing everything to Central. Now the developers who are developing all the APIs and the code and bringing all those pieces into Central have become their own bottleneck. So queuing up to get each of those things in with full functionality. And you just mentioned just the CX10K. All of the parts need to be updated and be able to be brought in together. And like you said, if you just bring in a basic minimum viable product, then people are going to continue to complain. And yet that bottleneck is still there and everything has to flow through that. So I think the marketing pull is saying, let's move everything over to Central, but the push from the bottom has to hit that bottleneck. So perhaps they need a lot more developers in that little piece. So that's just what I see.
Yeah, and as you bring it together, you've got to put that high level in. When you bring it all together, that enables you to do the advanced AI, because now you can see across the system, and you can't just focus on bringing in all the pieces without delivering that higher layer as well, so we can see the real benefits of this level of integration.
I think you're all right. I think that there's a lot of potential here for the future as we look at where the industry is going, not just networking and wireless and security discretely, but as a whole. But the key there is that these need to be integrations together. They need to be a part of HPE Aruba networking and not discrete units that are running kind of off on the side doing some things. And I think that gives a company like HPE Aruba Networking a real opportunity to kind of differentiate themselves in the space by creating those integrations. And it's something that HPE is actually very good at. When you look at some of their non-networking products, they've done a great job of integrating those into the platform that would eventually grow into being GreenLake. And I think that there's been a lot of moves recently that have really helped, kind of focusing on those product lines and making sure that everybody knows what you're selling and what you're all about. That's what customers want. Customers don't want 47 different paint swatches. They want 6 things that they can choose from that have the stuff that they need. And I think that that's valuable. And I can't wait to see what Aruba has in store for not only the rest of 2023, but also for 2024. And, with the news that Aruba Atmosphere and HPE Discover are kind of going to be co-located in 2024, I think that goes a long way to making sure that we have even more integration coming down the line. I want to thank all of our delegates for being a part of this roundtable. If you want to check out the videos that we recorded during the Networking Field Day experience, make sure you head over to our YouTube channel if you're not already there, youtube.com/techfieldday, and just look for Networking Field Day experience. You can also check out techfieldday.com to not only see the videos from those presentations, but also check out any of the coverage that we're seeing from the event. We will be back with more great roundtables in the future, so make sure that you are following our YouTube channel and you check our website frequently for the most updated schedule of our upcoming events. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.